let's have a conversation about the seriousness of substance abuse and mental health disorders. Oftentimes, when they're close to home, they're much more than an isolated incident. They can be classified as a family crisis. Today, it is estimated that approximately 19 million children, or 1 in 4, live with a parent or caregiver who are currently battling a substance abuse disorder. Meanwhile, more than 6 million of those children live with a parent who is suffering from addiction and mental illness. Research continues to demonstrate that mental health and addiction can have a profound impact on the vitality and veracity of families across the country, leaving their loved ones to search for answers, resources, and hope, according to my friends at the National Institute of Health. In this conversation, I had the opportunity to sit down with my friend Mark Astor. He's a partner at Astor Simovitch Law, whose mission goes well beyond practicing law. As Astor puts it, I didn't set out to build a law firm. I set out to save families. He draws on his experience as a former prosecutor, and now as one of the nation's leading attorneys working at the intersection of law, addiction, and mental health. Mark shares what he witnessed from inside the criminal justice system, people who were suffering from untreated addiction and mental illness. They often don't receive treatment or healing. They get processed, punished, and traumatized, while their families are left feeling powerless and alone. Today, Mark and his team help families to navigate some of the most unimaginable challenges of the day, from emergency guardianship, involuntary treatment proceedings under Florida's laws, including the Baker's Act, the Marchman Act, and coordinating with clinicians and treatment providers. They use the legal system as a pathway, recovery, safety, and long-term stability. During our conversation, we touched on things such as why families often wait too long to seek legal intervention, the critical difference between protecting a loved one and enabling destructive behavior, how legal tools can become life-saving interventions during a mental health episode or crisis, and finally, what every family should know when a loved one refuses treatment, and why compassion and boundaries must work in tandem during the recovery process. And Astor joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I started my conversation with Astor by asking him why it's important to him to be a fierce advocate for those dealing with mental health, addictions, and illness. to making sure that their future is as bright as possible.
Okay, so let me answer your question. That is a good way to start. So, the mission of the firm is to save families whose loved ones are suffering from substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. And, typically, Kevin, families are calling us from all over the country, not just Florida, but as far west as California and, Hawaii and Oregon and, certainly, the Northeastern corridor, New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, those areas. And the families are calling us because there's somebody in the family, typically an adult child with a long history of drug use, mental illness, treatment that doesn't work, if they'll even go. They're probably med non-compliant. They may well have been a guest of the state through either the criminal justice system or the mental health system, and maybe even an overdose. And families call us and they want us to fix that problem. So obviously, Kevin, as a law firm, we're using the legal system to help families with that situation. So why would they use a lawyer? Well, typically when you're dealing with somebody who has a behavioral health issue and it's been going on for a long time, the problem is that person, the nature of that disease is that this person is not capable of making the decision to save themselves. So if they cannot save themselves, who's going to make it? Well, there's a couple of options. Number one, it could be the state. And the state can help them one of two ways. And I say the word help tongue in cheek because people typically don't get better when the state gets involved in their life. But there's two ways the state gets involved. One is the criminal justice system, because people with behavioral health issues tend to get arrested or can do. So they end up in jail or a state penitentiary. Number two, the state can step in using the state's mental health system. And again, people don't tend to get better in a state-run psychiatric hospital. So the other option is that the family can get the authority, can make the decision to save this person. How do they do that? Well, we use the legal system to get them control over what is typically an out of control situation. And it could be something as simple as, well, we just get a court order to have them picked up and taken to a place of safety for 72 hours. Or maybe we get that followed up by an order to send them to treatment for the next 3 months. And or maybe we need to control their finances. We want to have access to the medical records so we can see what's going on. We want to restrict their ability to go to travel and leave the state. Maybe we want to take away their driver's license, decide where they live, who they spend time with. So it's about empowering the family, Kevin, so they can make the decision that their loved one cannot make, which is to go into treatment in a clinically appropriate facility, stay long enough, take your medications, and work the recovery program. Because ultimately, if somebody doesn't make the decision for this person, the consequences for that or for not doing that can be very, very severe. So that's what we're doing. And there's other aspects to it. So
Yeah,
that's it in a
absolutely.
nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, I know that you started this work based on your experience as a prosecutor, and you realized that sometimes the system wasn't enough, as you had just alluded to, and often say you didn't set out to build a law firm. You set out to save families, my friend. And I know that this work is important to you because of your experience as a prosecutor, because you saw people with untreated mental illness and you wanted to help and addiction. So I'm wondering how your experience as a prosecutor and seeing this untreated addiction inspired you to do the work that you're doing now, my friend. Tell me more.
Yep. So, I mean, that certainly was a big influence on my life, Kevin. I was a student intern with the state attorney's office here in Palm Beach County in 1993, and I tried about a dozen jury trials as a student intern, which was a lot of trials as a basically a second year law student. And, I was really, I think initially I was like, okay, let's just put all the bad people away, right? But then I realized something because I was starting to see the same people over and over again. And what I realized was those people are dealing with, drug issues, mental health issues. Now, back in the 90s, Kevin, and this is around the time of the O.J. Simpson case, and I say that because I remember being interviewed on the local television I had a lot more hair and I was a lot slimmer. They wanted to interview a prosecutor about the O.J. Simpson case, so that was around that time. And so I said, okay, what's going on here? Now, in around that time, we didn't have some of the what I call diversionary courts that we have now. We didn't have drug court and mental health court and veterans court. We didn't have any of those things. And even today, Kevin, at least in Florida, the mandate in our criminal justice system is to punish first and to rehabilitate second. Well, if you don't have any way of getting these people help and they keep coming back, then eventually the only choice is to just lock them up for as long as we possibly can. And that's what used to happen, right? At some point, like, okay, this person was given probation. They violated probation. They got arrested again. Okay, well, let's just lock them up. I mean, what else can we do? We're just going to punish them. And so that was sort of my real first experience. Now, after I left the state attorney's office in 1999 and did defense work, um, my focus was a little bit different because I was trying to build a business, right? I just gotten married. I needed to put some food on the table for my new wife, and that was a short-lived marriage. I was only married for a year, but I think after that, Kevin, I really sat down and asked myself if I was enjoying being a lawyer anymore, and the conclusion I came to was that I was not. And it took me until about 11 years ago. So that was 2000 and what are we, 16, 15. It took me 16 years really after leaving the state attorney's office to find my passion again for practicing law. And what I had some very close family members and friends who had these issues, and I said, I know I'm going to build a law firm helping those people because nobody has done it. Nobody's doing it. And so in February of 2016, with no money and while I was broke, I sat down in the local library here in Boca Raton where I reside, and that's where I opened up the law firm. So it really was, it was obviously being a prosecutor, Kevin, had a big influence on me, but it wasn't just that. It was that and how it was affecting family and friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Mark, I also wanted to talk to you about, the whole concept of is justice truly equal? Because the Sentencing Project, they reported that there are significant disparities, as you know, throughout the American justice system, with people of color accounting for a nearly 7 and 10 incarcerations of individuals of Black Americans being summarily more likely to than white Americans to be under correctional supervision in America today. And I'm curious to ask you about not only Black Americans, but whether you think there are injustices or inequalities in today's justice system, and how we work together to make justice truly equal. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I have a question, and I don't know, I appreciate what you're saying because you're coming, as a Black American talking to a white guy from England, your perspective is different, and I appreciate that. What I would ask you, Kevin, is when it comes to statistics, I'm not an expert on the statistics when it comes to race. I think that your question is well founded. I guess the issue is a black man or even a black woman more likely to go to prison for the same crime, for the same offense, than say somebody who's not black? Do the statistics support that? I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking you.
Yeah, from a societal standpoint, I was asking more of societal. The so For some background, this statistics came from our friends at Axios, and I'm more interested in asking you just generally about inequalities in the justice system and how we get to a more, just and equal dispensing of justice, and what do you think the bottlenecks are in that conversation? And I
Well,
use a Black Americans only because of, how disproportionately society tells us that they're viewed by the justice system. So you can take that question in any direction you like, my friend.
well, I have a question. When you say inequality, what are we talking about? Are we talking about somebody's more likely to go to prison, or they may not get better as good a legal representation? I mean, tell me where the inequality is, so we can focus on I can address that for you.
Yeah, in terms of legal representation, the ability to afford legal representation, and the more propensity to go to prison just based on societal factors like race and perception within society.
Okay. I mean, so in terms of legal representation, so I mean, even when I was a prosecutor, the bulk of people were being represented by court-appointed counsel, the public defender's office.
Mhm.
And I will tell you that some of the finest lawyers that I ever litigated against, and some of the best trials and most challenging trials were where clients of all different races were represented by the public defender's office. Now, that being said, I th I the issue I think the public defenders face is that when they are court appointed, they're also handling probably, at least when I was a prosecutor back in the 90s, Kevin, I handled, even as a misdemeanor prosecutor, I had anywhere between 350 and 400 cases at any one time in my office, cycling through the system, right? I mean, so if you figure that 90, even if 80% of those people are being represented by the public defender's office, the numbers are staggering. When I went into a felony trial unit, handling anywhere between a first degree and a third degree felony where somebody was facing state penitentiary time, I was probably handling at least 200 cases. And again, even if you figure that 80% of those people were represented by the public defender's office, right? So if I had 200 cases, 160 of them were public defender cases. That number of cases is staggering when you're dealing with serious felony cases. So the public defenders tended to be overwhelmed with clients, right? So even today, right, when I go in and handle a case, I've only got one case on the docket, one, right? When there's court-appointed counsel, because on some of the cases, even though they're civil in nature, Kevin, counsel's going to get appointed, they probably have anywhere between 10 or 15 cases. So asking a lawyer to be as prepared on those kinds of cases where they have so many cases, I think is a big ask. So it's not the quality of the lawyer that's an issue, it's the amount of work they're asked to do
Mhm.
and still give that person effective assistance of counsel. There's some brilliant lawyers in the public defender's office, brilliant, both federal and state. Some of the finest laws ever litigated, but their resources are limited because they are overwhelmed. And I would agree with you. A large number of those people, Kevin, were black people. Okay. And so I think if we're talking about a bottleneck, that's probably where it is, right? Is not having the same quality of legal representation because the lawyers are overwhelmed, right? And a lot of those folks do not have the resources to hire private counsel. Do I think you get a better lawyer? Probably. And it's not because the lawyer it's not because the lawyer subjectively is a better lawyer. It's because that lawyer has less volume and probably more resources when they're represented a private client. And I think that's where the problem is. So, you know, it's a resource issue as opposed to, you know, um,
A
the
human,
but
yeah, a human issue. I got you.
right now, does that mean, for instance, I'll give you for instance, because and I'm happy to talk about this. I appreciate you brought it up. I was asked to do commentary on the Carmelo Anthony case. I did Fox Live twice over the last couple of weeks talking about that. And one of the issues, Kevin, was the fact that there were no blacks on the jury, right? I don't know the exact makeup, but I believe there was mostly white people and some Asian people. And one of the issues is going to be, certainly on appeal, did Carmelo Anthony get a fair trial, right? And the facts aside, right? Because you can't say, well, he did it anyway, so who cares? That's not how our system is supposed to be set up, right? Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, meaning she doesn't look at the race of the individual. Now, are there certain do we have prejudices in our country? I think so. Listen, I'm a conservative Jew who grew up in England. Try being a conservative Jew living anywhere right now.
Hmm.
I mean, the amount of anti-Semitism is gone through the roof.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm not immune to some of the prejudices towards black people that has gone on for a long, long time, and it has gone on for a long time, and I think it still exists. But I don't know how we go about removing that human element from the system, right? I think it's something that happens over time by education, right? Do I think there are certain subjective racial biases that people hold? No question about it. Do I think it can affect the outcome of a trial? I believe it can. So I think your point's well taken. I don't know, as we sit here, Kevin, how we wave a magic wand, or if there's a magic wand that can even be waved to remove that. It's something that's going to happen over time. So
Yeah.
I hope that asks your question. It was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I just wanted to share some of my experiences with you.
No, I appreciate that, and it's an ongoing conversation that
It
doesn't
is.
doesn't have a singular answer for sure. But know, going back to your bailiwick, my friend, your firm's mission goes well beyond legal representation. I know that you work closely with treatment professionals and recovery professionals and families to create holistic solutions. So how does focusing on recovery and healing help you build more authentic relationships with the people you serve, especially when they're facing some of the most painful and challenging moments of their lives, my friend? What do you want people to know about the work that you do from a human connection perspective? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're really trying to communicate, and one of the reasons I love talking to people like you, Kevin, and I put out I put out video content every day, is what we're trying to communicate to families is that there is an option available to you, right? Because the option that's available here in Florida, I think, is unique to Florida, right? It's not just that we have great treatment here, but we have a legal system that can empower a family to make that decision on behalf of their loved one because they can't make it. And so it's about the initial conversation, Kevin, is about giving families options, right? Because by the time they get to us, they feel like they've run out of options. They feel like, they've run out of rope, right? I mean, they are sick and tired of being sick and tired because they've never been able to find a solution to the problem. And so what we're trying to say to them is, look, there is an option. We need to get your loved one to Florida, and that's maybe a whole conversation in and of itself. Let's get them to Florida, and let's get you the authority to make the decision for them so that you can save them. And so it's about options. And my late father, who was, by the way, Kevin, was not an educated man. My dad left school at 14 and my mother 16. So I come from somewhat humble beginnings. And he used to tell me, when it comes to making important life decisions, that you can consult with all the experts that you want, but ultimately you got to do what's right for your family. And so when mums and dads call us, it really is about giving them some options and saying, here's option one. And if you don't do that, here's potentially the consequence. Here's option two. And if you do that, here's the consequence of that. So it's about giving families options and letting them know there is a potential solution, and they don't have to say, well, okay, we're throwing our hands up. There's nothing else we can do. So that's what we're trying to communicate to families, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mark, I'm also curious to ask you how we make the law more human centric. And what I mean by that is so many people often view the legal system as int- intimidating or unapproachable unless they have the money to create a system of defense. But I know it's a mission or passion of yours to make the law more approachable for people because we all deserve defenses that defend our rights as citizens. So I'm curious about what do you think goes into the intersection of making the law rather more human and accessible to more Americans. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I think from our perspective, Kevin, it really is about explaining the process, right? Because, as humans, we're hardwired to avoid anything that's uncomfortable, right? I mean, that our subconscious mind equates that with danger. And so that's why we're like, well, who wants to go to court? And the other thing is, Kevin, it's not just about explaining, how this process works or the process that we work with, how that works. I think it's about reassuring families that we're there for them. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about, Kevin, is having, say, mum and dad on one side of the courtroom and their adult child on the other side. And who wants to become adversarial with their children? Who wants to testify against their own loved one in front of a judge? And so I think it's about reassuring families that they're not alone, right? I mean, we speak to thousands of families every year. We're in court hundreds of times every year working with families and saying, look, we've been there. This is what you can expect as the process unfolds, as we start to file things and as we go in front of the judge, and this is what the judge is going to ask, and this type of thing. And it's explaining the process to them because then they don't fear the unknown. And and look, we understand, and we tell families, look, you're going to have questions. You're going to have questions throughout the process, and as we go through it, we want to answer those questions for you, right? And the other things that sometimes families like to do, Kevin, is they like to hypothesize about what could happen. And I tell families, I'm happy to have that conversation. We can talk about the what ifs until the cows come home. But rather than playing the what if game, because I think that just creates more uncertainty, let's cross each bridge as we get to it. Right? Because some of the what ifs are never going to happen. So why worry about something that's never going to happen? So we try to reassure families that way. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, this is a legal process. It is a little uncomfortable. And, I've built a team around doing this work and only this work, right? I'm not a jack of all trades. I do one thing. This is it. And so
Mhm.
I've built a team that not only has empathy and sympathy for families, but understands that these families are in crisis and they're afraid and they're nervous and being there for them. I mean, each lawyer has at least two support staff because families need to be able to talk to somebody sometimes, and that's important too.
Yeah, and Mark, I'm also curious to ask you about why you believe that families can't afford to wait. And one of the most specific thing to tell people is if they wait too long to engage in the legal process from this perspective, they may lose some of the protections that they would have gotten if they started the process earlier. So tell me why you believe it's important for people not to wait when engaging legal support because timing is everything in the legal profession, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so look, I think one of the things that people have to overcome or appreciate, Kevin, is that this is a disease, right? It's not necessarily a conscious choice. And sometimes when we speak to parents, they are, at least one parent is saying to us, oh, I don't understand. Why does he continue to do this? Why does she continue to do this? And it's about explaining to the family, about them appreciating the fact that this is a disease of the mind. And like any disease, it's progressive unless treated. And so if you don't treat it over time, it will eventually get to the point where it may destroy the host, or they end up in jail, or they end up in a state mental hospital. And obviously, like any disease, the further down the line it gets, the harder it becomes to treat, and the longer it takes to treat, and get the person into recovery. So, I mean, it's a bit like there's the difference between treating somebody with stage 1 cancer versus stage 4.
Mhm.
You're at stage 4. I mean, it's all hands on deck, and you're doing everything you can to save the patient. You're at stage 1. It's much easier to treat, and for that person to experience, remission, right? Remission for cancer, recovery for behavioral health issues. So we want to try and get in front of this thing as quickly as we can. But that's not always the case. And, my late father used to tell me that people don't like calling lawyers, they don't like hiring lawyers. And so we're typically the last port of call, Kevin, when the family feels like they've tried everything. So we're normally at stage 4 by the time the case comes to us, which is not incurable, but it takes time. Recovery is a journey, it's not a destination. And I tell every family, look, this is probably going to take a year. You don't necessarily have to hire us for a year, but think of this as a year-long journey to get your loved one back in the game, to get them to not only experience recovery, but to be able to maintain it for the rest of their lives. We want to try and get this right the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mark, I also wanted to talk to you about the revolving door between mental illness and incarceration. Now, research from the Prison Policy Institute found that, approximately 27% of the people jailed 3 or more times within a year or a single year reported having a moderate or serious mental illness. Now, that 27% number, I'm sure, has evolved over time and has seen some improvement in certain areas also. So I'm curious to ask you about, how we reduce the rate of recidivism and how you think we can offer more tailored support to reduce the amount of people that we incarcerate. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. I mean, I know that to go back to what we had talked about with regards to inequality, I think that this is one area where there is clearly inequality. And one of the things I've been very vocal about is the fact that we have to make quality, clinically appropriate treatment available to everybody, especially people who don't have the finances. And so when it comes to good treatment, there's no question there's an inequality, right? If you want to go to the best treatment center in Florida, you either have to have the finances, the financial resources, or really great insurance. Well, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people don't have those two things. So what's their option? Well, they can go to a county facility. Well, the counties have facilities, but they're limited. And what I mean by limited is they're overwhelmed. They have limited resources for the amount of people who really, really need them. And so, right, so I can get you a court order, but if we're going to use a county facility, is there a bed available to take the person? And a lot of the time, Kevin, there isn't. And so when mental illness goes untreated like any disease, it just gets worse with time, as I talked about, and eventually that person can end up in the criminal justice system. And so the inequalities, we're not making great treatment, right? So obviously, if somebody has been to prison, or some type of incarceration 3 times because of a mental health issue, the question I have is why didn't they get help the first time? What
Mm-hmm.
happened? Well, probably because they didn't have access to great treatment. And that is the real inequality. That is the bottleneck for you, right? So if we could have gotten that person great treatment the first time they got arrested, there's a good chance they don't come back the second or third time. But we don't have that option. I mean, we do have things like mental health court and drug court and veterans court. So I think we're trying. It's very interesting, Kevin, that you asked this question. It's good time. Just yesterday, I did a video about the fact that I guess Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., as I guess they've launched an initiative, and I don't want to get political here, so I hope people don't take it this way, but it looks like the federal government is trying to throw some money at this problem, which sounds like a good idea, but anytime the government throws money at a problem, Kevin, there's always going to be people out there who want to take advantage of it. I mean, we've seen huge fraud in Minnesota and New York and now in California. So if the government's going to throw money at it and give people money to go get to treat people, the question is that money going to get to the people who really need it, or is it going to go to people who are going to steal it so the problem continues? And so I hope there's going to be good oversight. So I think that our government has acknowledged there's a problem. Whether or not it gets solved by throwing, I think it's like $700 million at it, I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. The proverbial jury is going to be out in that, but we have to make good treatment available to everybody. I think that is one of the shame, if there's some shame about how we've treated people with behavioral health issues, this is it. We've not done a good job taking care of them. And I would agree with you. People, who are in the minorities have not had access to great treatment because they haven't had the resources to pay for it. And
Yeah.
there's definitely an inequality there. No question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, I also wanted to ask you your opinion, and I know you hold the belief that waiting until a person is ready to seek treatment or legal attention is one of the most common beliefs that is in addiction recovery is that someone must be ready to accept help before meaningful change can happen. And I know that you argue that sometimes we need to, reverse that thinking because it needs to be an all hands on deck approach. And, sometimes, we have to make sure that we protect the person from themselves and really start that intervention process earlier. So I'm wondering if you can give me your perspective on the whole waiting until they're ready a concept and how we can rethink that. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah. So, sometimes I get a family and say, well, we're going to wait until they hit rock bottom. Well, their rock bottom may be they're dead, or they're in prison, or
Hmm.
they're in a state hospital. It is not about your loved one hitting rock bottom. It is about the family hitting rock bottom. It's about mom and dad hitting rock bottom. When have you when have you suffered enough? When has your family suffered enough? When is your loved one, the patient, when have they suffered enough? So it's not about your loved one hitting rock bottom. It's about you, the family, the parents hitting rock bottom and saying, we've had enough and we want a different outcome for our family because it is a family disease. And what I mean by that, Kevin, is that when somebody in the family is sick, has this disease, what does it do to the family? It destroys it, right? It's why parents get divorced. It's why the siblings move away. It's why nobody in the house can sleep. And so it's about the decision makers, the family, the parents, when they've hit rock bottom, when they've suffered enough and they've had enough, and they're now willing to have a conversation about having a different outcome for their family, for their loved one. That's the rock bottom. That's when they've had enough. And that's when we want to talk to them. When they're ready to make the commitment.
Yeah, because it's an all hands on deck approach, and if they're not fully invested in the process, it's a waste of resources, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes the family's just not ready to make that decision. And sometimes what they're saying is, well, eventually, we're going to wake up from this nightmare. Our loved one is going to wake up one day and said, "Yep, I have a problem. I need help." Does that happen? I guess it does. Maybe occasionally it happens. More likely than not, it's only happening in the movies. In my world, that does not happen. And failure to act can have very severe consequences. And look, I'm not here to tell people what to do. I'm here to give you some options. And if ultimately a family decides they're not ready for whatever reason, that's fine. It's a no judgment zone. I'm just telling you what can happen if you don't make that commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, I know that you're someone who has drawn fascinating parallels between, building a business and rebuilding after a life of addiction, my friend. When you compare entrepreneurship with recovery, what similarities stand out to you the most, my friend? Are there qualities required for lasting success in both building a business and this journey in recovery, my friend? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's another great question, Kevin. This is you've got me thinking here this morning. So look, when I started my business in 2016 out of the local library and I was broke, I mean, it was really about I did not realize like that I was entrepreneurial until I really needed to be. And look, it's taken us 10 years, and my wife has been my partner for for the bulk of that time. And so she's been on that journey with me. It really is about having grit, right? And there have been many ups and downs. There was times where I thought the business was going to go broke, and and 11 by the way, 11 months after I opened up the firm, I lost my dad too unexpectedly. So I had to deal with that because I didn't have any money to pay for a funeral. So I think it's really about facing the adversity and being willing to overcome it. It's about being uncomfortable and being comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that for families, when it comes to the recovery journey, because like I said, it's a family disease, it's about appreciating the fact that recovery is not a straight line, right? I tell families recovery is like the stock market. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. If you invest in the stock market and you stay there long enough, the trajectory is upwards, right? You'll make your money, but it takes time. Recovery is the same way, right? It's not a straight line. I don't just file a petition, we get a court order, and we're good to go. I mean, there are good days and there are bad days. People relapse, people walk out of treatment, people become med non-compliant, and it's about working the program, not just your loved one working the program, but the family working the program because they're on recovery too. They're working on their journey too, and it's about appreciating the fact that it's going to take time. You got to have a certain amount of grit. You got to have a certain amount of commitment to this process, and you got to keep going. Because if you don't, and sometimes families will start and stop, they'll start and stop and start and stop, and it never gets any better because the minute they feel a little bit of discomfort because it's uncomfortable, they say, "All right, I'm done," right? But then it just gets worse. So entrepreneurship is about having some grit, working the program, keeping going. So is recovery. You got to work the program. You got to got to be getting a little bit comfortable being uncomfortable. And if you do that over time, things get better. Your business grows. The recovery process gets easier, right? The discomfort from dealing with a loved one who is experiencing a behavioral health issue lessens. Things get better, but it takes a little bit of time, right? It's taken me and my wife 10 years to get where we are, right? It didn't happen overnight. It just doesn't, so, and that's recovery. It takes time and you have to keep working at it,
Mhm.
right? I work on my business every day. People in recovery, and I've got some great friends in recovery who've been in recovery 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They go to a meeting at least once a week. They continue to work on their recovery. They work on their recovery. I work on my business.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mark, I've got two questions left for you. And the first of those two questions revisit something we've talked about earlier this morning. And that is, for families that feel guilty when engaging in the legal process, when it involves a loved one suffering or dealing with addiction and mental illness. And you make the argument that there are some legal tools that people aren't aware of most of the time that can actually aid in the process of recovery. So, talk to me about the feeling of guilt versus the feeling of assistance from a legal perspective. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, a lot of the time when it comes to guilt, families, especially moms and dads, feel like that this is their fault. They did something wrong. They were a bad parent. They yelled at their child when, he was 5, or they didn't show up to the soccer game when he was 8, right? There's all these feelings that somehow they were a bad parent and this is the result, right? If they had only been a better parent, this wouldn't have happened to their child. And I tell every family, look, that's just not realistic. Okay, it's not your fault, right? If God forbid somebody in the family gets cancer, does that mean is it your fault? I mean, I mean, did you give them cancer? Right? Did you give this person a behavioral health issue? And look, sometimes when it comes to these issues, there's a genetic component, right? If grandma was an alcoholic and now a child is an alcoholic, well, this is my fault that I birthed a child who had this genetic predisposition to being an alcoholic, and I think you have to let that go. It's no one's fault. It's a disease, and it is what it is, and you cannot blame yourself because, frankly, blaming yourself does not help the patient get recovery. It doesn't help you experience recovery because when families come to us, they're traumatized, and so when I say it's a no judgment zone when you call us, that's part of what I mean, right? This is not anyone's fault. It's a disease. And so we got to let that go. And that really letting that go, Kevin, is part of the family doing the work that is necessary so they can move forward too. Because when families come to us, Kevin, whether or not they know it or not, they are traumatized, right? They have to work their own program so that they can recover too because there's all these feelings of guilt and shame, and it's my fault or it's somebody else's fault. And you can't allow that to prevent the family from moving forward. And so, that really is a lot of the guilt component. And the other part of the guilt component, Kevin, is well, now I feel guilty because I'm having to, stand on the opposite side of the courtroom of somebody I love. I get it, okay, but the person on the other side of the courtroom, that is not your loved one. It looks like them, it sounds like them, and it walks like them, but that is not your loved one. On the other side of the courtroom is the disease that is running the show and that is destroying your loved one and destroying your family. And the only way the disease goes and leaves and your loved one comes back is to put them into treatment and keep them there long enough and make sure they take their medications and make sure they go to meetings and get a sponsor and work the program. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it like that and you come at it from that perspective, then you can let go of the guilt.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, my final question for you this morning has to do with your own personal and professional legacy. You've been in the legal profession for a while now, and you've ventured out on your own to help people with their mental health and addiction issues. So I'm curious, from a personal and professional standpoint, how do you want your legacy to be defined?
I think if when people look back, they'll say, here's a guy that wanted to make a difference, that wanted to make a small dent in the universe by trying to help as many families as he could. But also, I think my own legacy is one of perseverance, Kevin, not refusing to accept the fact that I was broke, right? I mean, listen, I could have gone back to work for the government. I could have gone and gotten a job at a law firm. I mean, I was a very established trial lawyer. I mean, I did 200 jury trials in 5 years. That's a lot of trials in a very short period of time. And I've tried everything from petty theft to capital murder. So I'm a very experienced trial lawyer, and I'm sure I could have gotten a job with a law firm, going out and trying cases. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to build something where I really felt like I was helping people. So when I left the state attorney's office, that was the piece for me that got lost. It was that feeling, that good feeling inside of me that I felt like I was helping people, right? Because when you're prosecuting somebody for murder, right, you've got the family of a decedent, or if it's a violent crime, you've got the victim of a violent crime. You can't unring the bell, but you can get them some closure, right? And when you get people closure, they can move on with their life and they can get over what the trauma that they suffered. And so I needed to get back to that feeling where I felt like I was making a difference. So that for me was part of my journey. And so I think if my legacy is anything, it's, here's a guy that felt like he needed to make a difference and help people. And he built a business around doing just that. So I think that for me is what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Mark, tell me, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
So they can find me online. Our website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. Or they can just Google me. Just Google Mark G. Astor. I've got, I think, about 1,200 videos on YouTube alone, where I'm giving away information for free. I just wrote a book all about Florida's Marchman Act. If you go to marchmanakbook.com, you can download the book for free. It's written chapters, there's video content. So there's a lot of information, not just about me, but about the work that we do. And one of the things, I guess one of my legacies is going to be, Kevin, is giving as much value and information away as I could for free. That's part of what I think is important to do. If you want to hire me to do legal work, I mean, that's great. That's how I put food on the table for my family. But if you just want information, there's 1,200 videos sitting on YouTube, and they're all free. You can download as much as you want. And I also tell people when I put out a video, if there's an issue going on in your family and I didn't make a video about it, post in the comments. I'll make that video.
Yeah, it's all about moving the needle of progress forward, and I think you do that with both compassion and empathy. And Mark, it was a real pleasure to get to know you this morning and engage in conversation about some important legal issues surrounding mental health, addiction, and recovery, my friend. I think you're doing fascinating work, and I want to thank you for the good work that you're doing and for engaging in conversation with me this morning. It's most appreciated.
I enjoyed my time with you. You do a great. This is a great podcast. You do a great job. I can tell that you did your homework, and I appreciate that.